So please join me in welcoming Graham and Eric for our first lightning round.
You've heard it all over the news. We have immigration issues. From Europe, we now have cows, dandelions, honeybees that were never here before. Plants like wheat and apples originate in the Middle East. Nile crocodiles and Burmese pythons are now all over the Florida Peninsula. Even our earthworms, that's right, our beloved earthworms, are not native to the US. As the United States population grows and diversifies, so too does our flora and fauna. I'm Graham Herbst, this is WTRZ Omaha. Each week on This American Forest, we explore urban trees and their environments to bring a fresh perspective on community forest management. This week we're talking about native versus non-native trees. My guest is Midwestern tree guru Eric North, urban forestry professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, hoping you shed a little light on this topic for us. Professor, thanks for joining us.
Hey Graham, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm hearing this word native a lot these days. How do we know what we consider native anyway?
Well, generally native plants and or animals are considered native if they evolved and adapted to a particular set of environmental conditions at a particular region. And we consider plants native to a given area if they were discovered by Europeans before European settlements greatly changed a particular landscape. So the time frame may vary a bit for each US state, but typically each state does have some sort of plant survey that details what plants were found, and most of those surveys were typically completed sometime in the 1800s. There are some problems with this approach to native plant classification, however. First, the system doesn't account for the movement of plants and landscape level management by indigenous people who moved plants and managed landscapes for similar reasons as Europeans, for crops and things like that. They just use different tools and to different degrees. Second, we tend to use native plant lists as though they're static and defined by political boundaries. We think of trees as being native to a particular state instead of native to a particular ecosystem. And there's nothing magic or special about plants that were found in the 1800s at a particular area, especially in the context of climate change.
Yeah, I have a friend with a forested acreage. He deals with tree of heaven a lot, running around all over. It hasn't been easy. It seems like non-natives really cause a lot of problems. Shouldn't we be using strictly natives in our landscapes then?
Yeah, so that's tree of heaven is an easy one to pick on. We definitely brought it over because it was really adaptable to our urban environments, and it quickly became fairly problematic as it really did actually adapt to almost anywhere and then escaped our urban environments and now has invaded the surrounding natural areas. Even the eucalyptus in California, originally brought here from Australia for landscape uses and later for timber and some fuel wood production, has a tendency to overtake natural areas, reducing biodiversity and damaging our ecosystems. The Callery pear, yet another tree we brought over, non-native, which has escaped cultivation and into our natural areas. But the Callery pear, it's a little different. It's actually become a symbolic tree in some areas, serving as the survivor tree for New York City's 9/11 memorial. So it actually does have some important cultural significance. So it's not always a black and white issue.
It seems these days many people are leery of immigrants, afraid of change. Can non-natives be helpful sometimes?
Yeah, we have to remember that our urban environments are not necessarily natural or native environments. And the use of natives only simply will not help us meet diversity goals so that we can have sustainable tree benefits in our urban environments. There are some current and future, hopefully future examples of non-native species being useful. I already mentioned the cultural significance of Callery pear, and there are also the hybrid Asian elms that have been cultivated for their resistance to Dutch elm disease, which allows communities to sort of reincorporate these stately elms back into the diversity plans. Both the Norway spruce and Scots pine, which have become naturalized in a lot of areas without being invasive, have been great additions for our urban landscapes and even have some timber production importance. The common lilac, with its purple blossoms that really signify spring for all of us that live in the Midwest, that's actually a European native. And we're starting to see Manchurian ash being used in our Midwest urban forests to add to our diversity and keep ash as an important part of our systems. Even though I like to think of ginkgo as a global native, most people don't, but it has actually proven to be a very successful urban tree without escaping and without having invasive tendencies. It's important to remember it's not the origin, it's the action of a plant that matters in terms of its benefits or detriments to society.
Okay, all right, smart guy. Eastern red cedar in the Great Plains. If that tree weren't native, what would we be doing about it?
So eastern red cedar is kind of an interesting example that highlights the need for a nuanced approach in plant selection. So it's kind of complicated, right? It's classified as a native tree to about 75% of Nebraska, and it's not the origin, it's the action certainly applies here. Eastern red cedar has sparked a lot of heated debates and discussions about the best management for this native plant, with invasion biologists, essentially our scientists, labeling the plant as invasive, and land managers referring to eastern red cedar as an aggressive native to highlight the fact that it is actually a native plant.
Okay. So eastern red cedar hasn't changed. It's the context around the tree, really.
Yeah, exactly. Land managers argue that the aggressiveness of eastern red cedar is still, even though it's aggressive, it's still an important part of the ecosystem, and it's been our management changes and potentially climate change which has caused the problem. If this species were not a native invasive, so it's a non-native invasive, I think management objectives would be much easier to argue, as it could be made to eradication would be a reasonable way to manage this. But as a native tree adapted to the ecosystem, management decisions are less clear, and managing the ecosystems to remain to a static and often arbitrary point in time just doesn't make any scientific sense.
Thanks, Eric. Our relationship with city trees is complicated, so we need to have a more nuanced approach to them. Native trees can and do serve as the foundation for success in our landscapes, but we need many different trees to build resilient urban forests. By moving forward with a more informed approach on tree species, considering the action, not the origin, we can position our communities to be better prepared for challenges of climate change, insect and disease problems from global commerce, and just the ever-changing and stressful urban environment itself. I'm Graham Herbst, this is This American Forest. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Graham and Eric. That was great. I look forward to the next installment of This American Forest.